The meeting is now recording, and I'll now take the sederunt for this meeting of South Lanarkshire Council held on the 7th of December 2022. I think I've managed to capture most of the members, so in order to speed it up, I'll just check the couple of members that I don't, and I'll read out the apologies. We have apologies from Councillor Bradley. I'll just check. We don't seem to have Councillor Corbett. Thank you. We have apologies from Councillor McAdams. We have apologies from Councillor McClymont. We don't seem to have Councillor Razak. Thank you, Councillor Devlin, so we'll keep an eye for that. And we have apologies from Councillor Ross. I'll now hand you back to the Provost for today's business. Thank you.
Are there any declarations of interest?
Thanks, Chair. I need to declare an interest on item 7. It's about me. Can I also point out that I had my child at 34 weeks and 1 day, which is today, and I've worked out that Alec Allison is the most qualified and experienced man or person to birth my baby. So can we please hurry this up?
Colleagues, would anyone mind if Councillor Hamilton remains in the chamber during that item? I'll save her exerting herself by leaving the room and standing outside. I think we would be glad to allow that, Councillor Hamilton. So thank you for that. Anyone else? Sorry? He would. He would. Anyone else? Any other declarations of interest? Okay. Can we move to the minutes of the previous meeting, please? Pages 5 to 12. Can we agree the minutes? Thank you. Can we move to item 3, please? Minutes of the Risk and Audit Scrutiny Committee, pages 13 to 20. The minutes are submitted for information, and can I ask that you note the minutes from the Audit Scrutiny Committee? Thank you. Okay. I'm going to move now to the item of urgent business, and I'm going to invite Councillor Joe Fagan to speak to that. And the item is being circulated to you at the moment, so we'll give you a moment or two to look at that.
Thank you, Provost, and I have also circulated that emergency motion, that urgent item of business to the business managers. The Council will be aware of the outcome of the recent job evaluation in home care and trade union concerns about the implications for the workforce. The expectation that the process would lead to positive movement on pay and grading to the benefit of the workforce has not been met, even though the role they are undertaking has evolved significantly in the 10 years since the last evaluation. The process is understandably independent of councillors. The integrity of that process must rightly be maintained. But if we as a council are to have confidence in the process, then we must be confident that its outcomes are rational and justified. I'm sure I speak for the whole council when I say that the outcome of this evaluation is baffling. It's not for politicians to interfere in the evaluation, but equally we cannot be silent when people who went above and beyond during the pandemic are demonstrating outside this building and telling us this decision will demoralise a workforce already gripped by a recruitment crisis. This is a workforce in the front line of the winter crisis in health and social care. This is a workforce we applauded as key workers and rely on to give care and nourishment and dignity to the most vulnerable in society. Trade unions have the right to appeal the outcome. We should all encourage them to exercise that right on behalf of their members. The motion I'm presenting today asks us to ensure that the appeal process commences on receipt of evidence from trade unions and concludes in line with the demands of the trade unions with the minimum of delay. And whatever the outcome, given as we as councillors should not interfere in the appeal itself, we must ensure that those wider calls for change in social care are not ignored. Society must value the care workforce more, society must invest in the care workforce more, and we must give those employing these key workers, public servants, the resources we need to do so. Our new deal for employees, combined with decisions that the Council will hopefully take later this morning, demonstrates that where we can, this Council will act to make South Lanarkshire a better employer, a progressive employer that works with its trade unions to navigate the budgetary and recruitment challenges we all must wrestle with. To that end, the Council was asked to join the administration in requesting a paper setting out what further steps can be taken to support the home care workforce, so that whatever the outcome of this process, we consider what more can meaningfully be done to help them. But the fundamental issue is the one we are presented with today, and the one that trade union colleagues have joined us to recognise today. And put simply, Provost, these workers are worth more. They deserve better, and they need us now. And so I ask the Council to come together today, back this motion unanimously, and give the clearest indication we can to our home carers that this Council, for all its differences, is united today and on their side. Thank you.
Do we have a seconder? Councillor Convery.
Yeah, Chair, I would unanimously agree with everything that Joe Fagan said, and I'll second the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Chalmers wishes to speak. I think she's online.
Thank you, Provost. Thank you. On behalf of the SNP group, I'd just like to express our support for our home carers. They've been absolute stars over the last couple of years in particular. I know some of our members attended Unison's meeting yesterday. Thank you so much for organising. It was good to hear direct from carers. The outcome of the job evaluation is a huge disappointment and very frustrating. It's not appropriate for us to make further comments at the moment, but when an appeal process is underway. But in the coming weeks and months, we'll work with trade unions and home carers in a supportive and constructive way. Thank you, Provost.
Could I invite Councillor Alec Allison to speak, please?
Thank you, Provost. This is actually something that is quite a personal sense to myself. My mother received a great deal of support in the last 2 years before her passing in the spring from the home care service. So you see it firsthand exactly what they have had to do and what they were doing during the COVID period. It was also interesting yesterday. I couldn't make the whole meeting due to other commitments, but when I was in there at the start of the meeting, it was quite clear that there has been a change in the work specification, if you like, that the home care operatives have to deal with, and therefore it is disappointing, as the leader has said, that that was not recognised in the review. But that review is ongoing. There is still a process to be completed, and I would hope that the unions can put forward the information required to get the result that we are all looking for in the room here today. And therefore we are certainly going to be supporting this motion today. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor David Watson.
Thanks, Chair. I'm going to digress slightly with your permission, but it follows yesterday's meeting and 100% behind the carers and the fantastic job they do. They need more than our applause. They need to be recognised. They need to be recognised not just financially, but for the job that they do and be allowed to do the job that they do. one of the points made in the round table discussion that I was at, that a comment was made, care has been taken out of the caring. And we need to get back to caring as well. And I would plead with the leadership in social work, and also we've got a motion later on from the Liberals, that care needs to be put back at the heart of caring. And I know from my own personal experience with friends and family, carers aren't getting the time to care. And we need to get back to that as well. And it's not just about the financial rewards for these people. They need to be allowed to do the job that they want to do, and that's care for people. Thanks very much, Chair.
Councillor Mark McGeever.
Thank you, Provost. Many councillors attended that meeting yesterday, and it was great to hear from the workers who do an absolutely fantastic job. And it was really difficult to hear how underappreciated they feel and how lacking in confidence they are as a result of this process. That has to be changed, and while we can't interfere with that, and it's right that we don't, I think we want, all of us across this chamber want to make very clear to them that they are appreciated, that the job they do is recognised as being a skilled one. It's not just a difficult one. It involves care and compassion. It also involves an awful lot of professionalism, and it's huge responsibilities, and they are being asked to do so much more, and it is absolutely right that this council, as their employer, recognise that. And certainly the process should be expedited, the appeals process should be expedited. They need the reassurance that this is taken seriously, and I hope they will get that as a result of unanimous support today. Thank you.
Okay. Personally, I would like to say that you are an intrinsic part of the front-facing service that mix with the public every day. And that is something that we value, because the reports that come back to all of us as councillors, and everyone in here will have experienced care either through their constituents or through their personal family needs. And the reports that return to us are outstanding about the service that you provide under difficult circumstances, and also a lack of staff, because it's a difficult time for recruitment across many services. And whilst as Provost I can't have a political view on it, I can certainly have a personal view. And my personal view is that I hope that your review that's undertaken, as others have said, proves to be beneficial, and that, as the Leader of the Council has said, that we look at all the ways that we can support this very important front-facing service in the future. Colleagues, can I ask if we can unanimously agree the motion? Agreed. Thank you. Well done. Okay, I'm going to move on to item 4 in the agenda, and that's on pages 21 to 28. I'm going to invite our Chief Executive to speak on this report.
Thank you, Provost. The report before Council relates to the motion agreed at a previous Council meeting that gave me a delegation to draft a new protocol for our flag flying at the headquarters building here in Almada Street in Hamilton. So the protocol has now been drafted. It's included within the pack and attached as Appendix 1. This has regard to the terms of the motion and with reference to the national flag flying policy governing Scottish Government buildings where appropriate. During the process of putting together our protocol, I had the opportunity to consult with group leaders on the draft protocol prior to submitting it to today's meeting. I haven't had any negative response in terms of that engagement. The draft protocol proposes that for ad hoc requests from organisations and others to fly specific flags on particular days or to reflect particular circumstances that are not covered by the protocol, that I would determine such requests in consultation with you, the Provost. That's a deviation from the original motion. And just to explain, it's for the practicalities where we need to move quicker rather than going round all group leaders. So this arrangement reflects those kind of practicalities. So, Provost, hopefully the Appendix 1 sets out picking up the terms of the draft, the motion, that the draft picks up those terms
And the recommendation is simply that the external flag protocol is approved. Thanks, Provost.
Thank you. Do we have any questions? Councillor McCreery. Hang on a second. You'll need to maybe wait a minute. That's us. Okay.
Yep. Okay, thanks. I'd just like to thank the Chief Executive and his officers for fulfilling the request from the full Council in preparing the flag protocol. As members will note, the proposed protocol respects not only the Saltire and the Union flag of our 4 countries, but also of causes and dates such as LGBT Month, Emergency Services Day, World AIDS Day and International Workers' Memorial Day, to name but a few. I'm sure we all hope that the Ukrainian war will end soon, but until it does, the document recommends that the Ukrainian flag is included in our flag protocol. The protocol which has been produced is what is required, in my opinion, and I commend it to the Council. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, there are no other persons wishing to speak. Can we agree the protocol? Agreed. Okay, thank you. Item 5, Women's Health, pages 29 to 48. And Kay McVeigh will speak on this.
Thank you, Provost, and I'm delighted to be presenting this important paper reflecting work which will directly benefit around 3/4 of our workforce. The paper covers our review of the menopause policy and guidance, the Time to Test campaign and menstruation support. In the paper and in today's presentation, I'll use the generic terms women and female, but that is meant to include those who identify as non-binary, transgender and intersex. In terms of menopause, I think we should reflect we were the first council to introduce a menopause policy for the workforce. But as such, it's important that we take the time to review and update both the policy and the guidance to ensure that we are following best practice. In terms of the contents of the report, you'll see here that the key changes are to update our policy language and support to make it a bit more inclusive, update the guidance for our managers and also the support references and links that we include within the guidance. We also now have the opportunity to become a menopause-friendly employer, and Section 6 takes you through the requirements for that. And in my view, the Council could readily meet these requirements, and the additional resources that become available as a result would help us promote this important issue. In terms of menstruation support, that's covered at Section 7, highlighting we can use our learning from our menopause approach to take this key issue forward, supporting an open and supportive workplace where employees and managers can discuss important issues without any awkwardness in the language that is being used. You'll note there's important work ongoing in that area that would underpin our development of a policy. And that would provide us with an evidence-based approach. So I'm recommending that we get that key bit of work before completing our own work in terms of a policy in terms of going forward. But that doesn't mean that we can't provide more guidance both to the workforce and to managers in the same way that we have for menopause, and the intention here is very much to do that. The third item that is covered within this paper is time to test. It's on the back of Joe's campaign. And in terms of time for test, I don't know any women who look forward to their smear test, but it is a vital health check, and it's important that there's no barriers to attendance at appointments. This campaign arose from working women finding it difficult to schedule convenient appointments during the working week, and signing up for this demonstrates our commitment to creating an open environment where employees feel able to discuss important health issues, and it also gives us a key opportunity to provide educational material round about this key point and highlight the importance of preventative checks in general. Bringing all of these topics to Council provides a real opportunity to encourage open discussion and provide support. These are simple matters of biology. They are important health issues, and we should be able just to talk about them quite freely and frankly without people getting into a fankle about the language or feeling uncomfortable with the language. So in terms of the next steps, you'll see in the paper we want to communicate our refreshed menopause policy and guidance, sign up for the menopause-friendly employer status and join the Time to Test campaign.
And key would also be awaiting the outcome of that research, that important research in terms of menstruation, in order to aid our thinking round about policy and guidance in that key area as well. So turning back to the recommendations, I'm asking Council to note the menopause updates, agree that we work towards becoming an accredited menopause-friendly employer, agree to sign up for the Time to Test campaign. I was bound to get that the wrong way around. And that the position on menstruation support be noted. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you. Can I invite questions and comments, please? Councillor Leslie MacDonald.
Thank you, Provost. The administration welcomes this report, underlining our ambition to make this council a more progressive, inclusive employer. I'm delighted, as we all are, that we will work towards becoming a menopause-friendly employer and gaining accredited status, as well as supporting and signing up to the Time to Test campaign. These are all very important issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mary Donnelly.
Thank you, Provost. I would like to come back that we actually, myself and my colleague, moved on menstruation and in the schools, and that has been omitted from this paper, Kay, and I would like that to be included in the paper. I did speak at schools, at parent councils and head teachers, and were absolutely over the moon that we had entertained this policy, and they saw that as very helpful going forward for the schools. So if that could be included, I'd really appreciate that, Kay.
Kay, would you like to respond? The touch screen stopped here. Hold on a minute.
Should I?
Okay.
Thank you, Provost. I wasn't going to say anything too controversial there. And thank you, Councillor Donnelly. No, I was very mindful of the motion had encompassed both sides, and I had been discussing with Tony separately how you would take that forward in an education environment. As I'm sure you'll appreciate, there's a lot of good work is undertaken within the schools in relation to menstruation in particular. It's education's intention to put together a briefing note which would be separate to an employee policy, for example. Thank you.
Yeah. Councillor Julia Mars.
Thank you, Chair, and I would very much welcome this paper, and also support my colleague Councillor Donnelly's comments. That I'm pleased to hear that young people and school staff will be included in this policy, and that a separate briefing will come forward. I also would ask for a timescale for the guidance for employees and the briefing note to be available. And for it to come back to members in some form, presumably for noting, either to an executive or a full council, and after that be disseminated.
Yeah. Our IT is playing up a little bit this morning. Bear with us.
Okay.
The good news is I'm not going to karaoke. In terms of the guidance for staff, we would intend to issue that in January, so to give the team a little bit of time to work on that. I think the next Education Committee is February, so in terms of the education component, you would expect to see that there. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments or questions? Okay, colleagues, can we agree the paper? Thank you. We're moving on to item 6, the business growth grants increase in maximum grant level, and that's on pages 49 to 52 of your papers, and I'm going to invite David Booth to speak on that.
Thank you very much, Provost. The purpose of this report is to seek approval to increase the maximum level of grant support under the South Lanarkshire Business Growth Grant from £20,000 to £50,000 per business. In terms of background, the Council currently offers local businesses access to financial support through 2 business grant funds. Firstly, the Business Growth Grant, which offers 50% support for eligible project costs such as capital expenditure, infrastructure improvements, training, consultancy and exhibition costs. And the current maximum support for that is £20,000. And secondly, the Small Business Support Grant, which was introduced as a result of in response to the first COVID lockdown to assist businesses with smaller projects, also up to 50% of eligible costs. And that supports costs of up to £1,000 for sole traders and £3,000 for businesses employing people. The Business Growth Grant is funded 60% by the Council and matched to provide a further 40% through the European Regional Development Funding, or ERDF. With approximately £600,000 of ERDF funding available to be by 31st of March 2023 to ensure that the maximum income is achieved through ER funding. Members will be aware that businesses are operating in an increasingly uncertain economic environment, and a decision to increase the maximum level of the grant is recommended as an opportunity for the Council, together with the ERDF support, to maintain and enhance financial support for local businesses. Following representation by local authorities to the Scottish Government has agreed to extend the scope of the grant programme. This change allows support for businesses, sustainable and survivability, in addition to growth, low-carbon projects, and an increase in the maximum grant from £20,000 to £50,000 per business to help support local businesses with the ERDF funding. Section 5 of the report proposes amendments to the Business Growth Grant. These principally surround being capital expenditure and infrastructure improvements, projects creating and safeguarding local jobs, businesses paying the living wage to all employees and using fair work practices, businesses considering local supply chains, putting forward projects that build in climate change impacts, and completing serious and organised crime checks with Police Scotland. Since April 2022, the Council has approved 28 grant applications totalling £417,721 in grant support. The projected benefits of this funding to date equate to 139 new jobs created, 313 jobs safeguarded, and an increase in turnover of £4 million to the South Lanarkshire economy. It's proposed that an annual report will be brought to the Community Enterprise Committee summarising the grant support and projected outcome of businesses should this report be approved. In terms of existing implications for employees, existing economic development officers support the businesses through the current application process and would continue to do so if the grant is increased. In terms of financial implications, grant is funded through existing revenue budgets, including the West of Scotland Loan Fund legacy funds, and approval would ensure that the Council moves closer to a full spend of the ERDF funding. And in terms of climate change, sustainability and environmental implications, applicants will be required to consider the project spend that helps reduce climate change and are encouraged to use local supply chains. There are no other implications in terms of equality impact assessment and consultation. And I refer back to the recommendations. And the Council is asked to approve the following recommendations: that the maximum level of grant can be awarded to an individual business through the South Lanarkshire Business Growth Grant be increased from £20,000 to £50,000, and that the scheme of delegation for community enterprise resources is amended accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions or comments? And I'll invite Councillor John Anderson to speak first.
Thanks, Provost. It's quite common in here for councillors to welcome the reports. I'd like to deviate away from that, but say I'm sure the business community will welcome this report. I think it's much needed for them, considering the current conditions they are trading in with high inflation, food costs and also the fuel costs, particularly for small businesses. So I would welcome this report as well as on behalf of the business community. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Alec Allison.
Thanks, Provost. Yes, again, there's much good in this for being able to support businesses through a difficult time. The increase in the level of award, I think, is certainly needed, but also the broadening of the scope of the grants also. But I wonder if there is another area that we should be focusing on as well associated, and that is the survivability of new startups. It's something that we don't do to the best standard here. I don't mean in the council, but within South Lanarkshire, we have we have a higher number of businesses failing early on. And I think giving them extra support so that they can get through these very difficult first few years of their business. And if that could, I think that should be added into this report, if we can, targeting them to help with their survivability. Is that possible?
David.
As businesses, so survivability can be something that we will take due consideration of as part of that process, Councillor.
Thank you. Councillor Robert Brown.
So to join my voice to support the recommendations, I've had the opportunity since I took up the post of Chair of the Communities and Enterprise Committee to go around a number of the local companies and to see the good work that's done by the Council in this way and the surrounding efforts, if you like, that are made by the department to try and support local businesses. David Booth made quite a lot of comment about local supply chains. That's very clearly one of the things that is extremely important, both in terms of growth of the economy and in terms of making it sustainable growth in terms of the local supply chains, I think, which is extremely important. I think that the way in which the business support grants have been used has been very effective. I've seen some of the results of it myself in terms of the local companies, as I say, I've mentioned, and I think that the extra flexibilities given by this will be quite important. Alec Allison makes the very important point about survivability. That is really, quite frankly, at the heart of a good deal of what the department does on this matter, and I think actually you can take it for certain that it will continue to be very much at the heart of what we do. Thanks very much, Provost.
Councillors, thank you for your comments. Can we agree the report? Agreed. Thank you. We'll move on now to item 7 on the agenda, and it's family leave for elected members, hopefully not in the next 5 or 10 minutes. Pages 53 to 54, and can I invite Geraldine McCann to speak to this. Clean up again. Later. Yeah, David, that's it.
That's it. Probably I've got a loud enough voice, you would have heard me anyway. This report is an application for leave for Council to consider leave for Councillor Lindsay Hamilton to take her maternity leave. Council adopted the family leave guidance for councillors, which was prepared for by COSLA a few years ago. And Councillor Hamilton was the first person to take the benefit of that, and she's now the second. Councillor Hamilton has applied for leave from the 16th of January and intends, all going well, to conclude it on the 31st of July, returning to the Council on the 1st of August. During that time, on a temporary basis, her place in the various committees, outside bodies, etc., would be filled as deemed necessary by a member of the Labour group, because these are Labour group places. And Council is asked to delegate authority to the Chief Executive in consultation with the business manager of the Labour group to finalise those temporary memberships. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Councillor Allison.
Can I just say, I'm very much thankful for the confidence that Councillor Hamilton has given in me. Unfortunately, the legislation changed a number of years ago, and those involved in the agricultural world do not have the same rights over the human species in terms of their medical care. Apart from that, I don't have any of the equipment with me that may be needed. On a more serious note.
I'm awful glad you don't have one of these items they use when they're extracting babies from cows with you. So hopefully,
I was being far more diplomatic when I said equipment.
Councillor Mary Donnelly.
Sorry, I do have a serious issue. Whereas it's been left up to the business managers to fill the gap left by Councillor Hamilton, would it not be more appropriate, as it is a council decision who chairs the meeting, that it's actually in the paper who is going to chair and be depute to the Education Committee during the period that Councillor Hamilton is on maternity leave?
I think, Councillor Allison, that's probably a group decision within the Labour group, and it's not really something that we need to bring to the full council. I think people will be notified in due course who will chair the Education Committee whilst Councillor Hamilton is on leave, working very hard in other quarters of her life.
Sorry, could I check that with Geraldine? Because it's my understanding that it's the council that took, the full council that took these decisions, if not at its inaugural meeting, at its second meeting.
Geraldine?
It is the full council who approved the decision, but the council did agree in May or June that the chair of the committee would be Councillor Hamilton, a Labour member. So it would be appropriate to put another Labour member up into that role, and it would come back to council for noting whenever the decision is made.
Thank you. Anything further, Councillor Allison? Councillor Mary Donnelly.
Thank you, Provost. I would just like to take this opportunity. I've worked closely with Lindsay over many issues, particularly the women's issue, and I would like to wish her well in our going forward to have her baby.
Councillors, can we agree the paper? Agreed. Can we just have a little round of applause to encourage Councillor Hamilton? Let's hope everything goes well and that you enjoy your Christmas in relative peace and quiet. Okay, moving on to item 8 in the agenda. Councillor McAdams and Councillor Ross. Attendance at council meetings, pages 55 to 56 in your papers, and can I ask the Chief Executive to speak to this?
Thank you, Provost, and I'll be brief. Members will be aware that by statute, elected members need to attend a council meetings within a 6-month period. If they don't attend a meeting within a 6-month period, they stop being a member of the council, other than where council permission has been sought and granted or a good reason has been approved by the council. We are aware of the current ill health of both Councillors McAdams and Councillor Ross. This paper, just to simplify, is seeking an extension on behalf of both councillors for a period of up to a further 6 months, further non-attendance at council meetings from the due dates for both councillors. So again, Provost, hopefully non-contentious. I commend the report to council, and hopefully all members would agree.
Members, can we agree the report? Thank you. Okay, we're moving on to item 9, which is the notion of motion for the freedom of South Lanarkshire area to the Royal Regiment of Scotland, and that is on page 57. It's a motion that I brought forward myself, and it's seconded by Councillor Mark Horsham, and I'll just speak for a moment or two on it, and then I'll pass to Councillor Horsham. I received a request from the Royal Regiment of Scotland to ask the Council if you would formally agree to the freedom of South Lanarkshire being given to the regiment. I understand there are around 16 councils in Scotland that have already done this. The Royal Regiment of Scotland, known as Scots, came into existence on the 28th of March 2006, when all our historical antecedent regiments came together. There's a little adjustment to the paper. It should have read, one of them should have read as the Black Watch, as the Highlanders, Seaforth, Gordons and Camerons, and also included the Argyll and Sutherland Highlanders, 251 Lowland Volunteers and 251 Highland Volunteers. They amalgamated into one large Scottish regiment. Many of the antecedent regiments have over the decades been granted the freedom of several Scottish towns, cities and overseas. In the last 16 years, Scottish local authorities have very graciously granted this to the Scots. Some of these are close neighbours to South Lanarkshire. The honour allows the Scots to parade through the streets of that area with bayonets fixed, drums beating and pipes playing. With their flags, colours flying, it is an amazing sight for communities to see. As Scotland's largest infantry regiment, it's a real showcase and an opportunity to connect with the public. The motion is that the Council grant the freedom of South Lanarkshire to the Royal Regiment of Scotland at a date to be agreed in 2003. Could I invite Councillor Mark Horsham to second the motion?
Thank you very much, Provost. As Armed Forces and Veterans Champion for South Lanarkshire Council, I am delighted to second this motion. As mentioned, the Royal Regiment of Scotland was formed when various existing infantry regiments amalgamated. Each of these regiments had a proud history and distinct characteristics, which those who served were proud of. Even in today's modern army, the official dress uniform of the regiment is still as distinctive and renowned around the world as it ever was. In South Lanarkshire, we are served by the 6th Scots Reserve Battalion of the regiment, and recently we were delighted to host the band of the Royal Regiment of Scotland at Hamilton Town House on the first leg of their fundraising tour in conjunction with Poppy Scotland, Walking with Heroes. Most of us will know of family, friends and neighbours that have served and are serving with the regiment, not only carrying out duties during times of conflict, but in peacetime as well, such as helping communities during the Beast from the East storm, and more recently helping with the logistics of the COVID vaccination and test centres. The Scots are an important part of our communities, and this motion will go towards the continued engagement between the regiment and the people of South Lanarkshire. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you. Before I move to questions or comments, I would add that, just for your reassurance, that when Tom Little was looking at the scroll that we're likely to provide to the Royal Regiment, he assures me that they will not have the right to drive their cows or sheep up the centre of the main streets in our towns in South Lanarkshire. This was a historical thing that was in a lot of these scrolls, and I just want to reassure you that you'll not find Quarry Street full of cows or sheep unless Councillor Allison decides to bring some along with him. Can I invite Councillor Fagan to speak, please?
Thank you, Provost. I just briefly wanted to add my own remarks and obviously to thank you and Councillor Horsham for the initiative that you've shown in putting this before the Council. This is, I think, a first for the Council. We've never awarded the freedom of South Lanarkshire to anybody or anything as yet, and in this case I think the Royal Regiment of Scotland, I think, are worthy candidates for the freedom of South Lanarkshire. So on behalf of the administration, and I'm sure on behalf of the whole Council, as leader of the Council, I just want to express our support for the motion and look forward to the events that will be taking place in 2023. Thank you.
Thank you. Colleagues, can we agree the motion? Agreed. Thank you. Can we move on now to item, hang on, I think we're moving on to item 10 in the agenda, and we're actually at 5 to 11. So before we start this motion, I'm going to take a 5-minute break for our interpreters. Thank you. Thank you. If we could move on now to item 10 on the agenda, the notice of motion for parking charges, and this is on page 58 of your papers. And could I invite Councillor Convery to speak to the notice of motion?
Thanks very much, Chair. We've been round the houses with us a few times, colleagues, as you all know. Without boring people, because it's quite self-explanatory. But we looked at the zones in 2011. Every group in this council supported no charge. That's been the view of the Labour group since the charge was muted. It was a saving policy that was put forward. The initial policy was they would save £50,000. That was then reduced to a saving of £25,000 in 2021. And I've been consistent in my argument, not because I've got the biggest parking zone in South Lanarkshire, but it's totally unfair to ask people to park their cars where they live, and then the zones now are getting a tax in that particular area. The permits, let's say the people don't pay for the permits, and then we go to take them to court, and then we go to bring in admin people. It'll end up costing us money. And as people know who have been here a long time, once you set a charge, the charge doesn't stay. All it does every year, quite rightly, directors will come forward, or we'll add a 5% increase, or we'll do this, or we'll do that. So the permit charges, and hopefully it's going to be rescinded today, but if it comes in, these things will go up and go up and go up. And I've got to say, and it's not been political here, it's a fact of life. I've had people who vote Conservative, vote Labour, vote SNP, vote Liberal Democrat, come to me over the piece, because this has been a long-standing issue, and it's a serious issue with the people concerned. I've had card-carrying members of the SNP, of the Labour Party, come to me as well. So I'm asking the colleagues in the room today, please overturn. It's not been enacted yet. There's 3 bullet points, and one of them is the cost of removing the charge. And that sounds quite, oh, here we go, might cost a fortune. So far, there's been 110 permits, because there's a freeze on the permits just now. There's been 110 permits at £10 issued. That comes to £1,100. That's what we would need to refund to the people. And those people are not in my ward, they're not in Councillor Fagan's ward, they're in Cambuslang. So I would ask all councillors, please support the motion today and rescind the parking charges which are not in place at the present time, and let's keep it that way for the people that live in these zones. And remember, I'll finish in this, they were brought in because of the chaos surrounding the town centre in East Kilbride. It's all historical, this. At one time when it was single councillor wards, my whole ward was a parking zone. It was crazy. So we've looked at it, we've reduced it, and we're down now to a hardcore. And I'm pleading that these people should not be penalised for living in certain postcode districts in South Lanarkshire. Thanks very much, Provost.
Yeah, Councillor Fagan.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to second the motion. The only point I would add, I think the council has aired the debates on numerous occasions. The concern for me at the coalface of this, and attending the community council meetings, listening to the feedback from residents, is an issue that did generate a lot of interest at the time and a lot of opposition at the time. And I simply say to councillors across South Lanarkshire, bear in mind that 80% of these permits come in 2 wards, the East Kilbride Central North and East Kilbride Central South wards. It is regarded locally as indiscriminate, whatever the thinking behind the council at a policy level was. The key thing for me, and the reason that this is important, and the reason it's important to bring it back, isn't just because of the policy itself, but it is because I think this has, in those communities, become symbolic of a sense that the council isn't listening. And the way in which the consultation, the subsequent consultation was constructed, that excluded the status quo as an option that forced the residents to pick between two options which they would rather not have had to choose between. I don't think that was the right way to go about making the decision. And I accept we were in the minority in arguing this throughout the last term. All I'm asking is that if people understand the concern that there is about the way in which the decision was made, and look at this as a specific case as opposed to being part of a wider budget package as we did at the time, the costs here really are minimal, and I don't think the minimal costs justify the political pain that the council had to put itself through, or the political pain that the council would have to endure if it were to uphold that decision today. I think this, as I say, this is more than about the policy. It's actually about how decisions are made. And what I would appeal to the council to do is just accept that we've listened to the community. The community would rather keep the status quo, and the costs of preserving the status quo are minimal. And I think that is a much preferable position to be in, given the very modest costs that are involved, rather than trying to proceed with a policy that I do not believe commands the support of the people in those two wards where 80% of these permits would apply. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments? Members, can we agree the motion?
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Okay, we're moving on now to item 11 on the agenda. A notice of motion on open market purchase scheme, pages 61 to 62, and I'll invite Councillor Cowan to speak to her motion.
Thank you, Provost. First of all, I'd like to just quickly say I'd like to thank the housing officers, in particular Annette Finnan and Cameron Mitchell, for their discussions and the meetings over the past couple of months regarding this issue and the change to our open market housing policy. I did receive yesterday papers for next week's Housing Committee, and having read those, I'm satisfied that my points are covered. And so I really just wanted to thank everyone for taking the idea on board, and I'd like to withdraw the motion today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, we note that there is a paper coming forward from Housing next week, and the motion today has been withdrawn as the points have been covered in that. Thank you. Okay, can we move on now to item 12 on the agenda? Notice of motion, 16 days of activism against gender-based violence, solidarity with protesters in Iran. Page 63, and can I invite Councillor Kalikis to speak to our notice?
Hi. Thank you. On this, the 12th day of activism against gender-based violence, we acknowledge the Council's role in committing to ending violence against all women and girls across the authority and beyond. We commend the work of officers across the Council in educating, supporting and reporting where appropriate. While it is an indictment on our society that organisations such as WASLA and Lanarkshire Rape Crisis not only exist but are stretched, we are grateful for the extremely valuable work that they do in our communities. That every councillor in this chamber will have had some experience in casework of gender-based violence tells us that this issue is pervasive and that we cannot rest on our laurels. We must be actively anti-gender-based violence. Excuse me. Gender-based violence is rooted in the patriarchy that we continue to live with today. And although we've made great strides in progressing to a more equal society, the world is not an equal place. When one glass ceiling is shattered, another appears in its place. UN Women has estimated that the impact of COVID-19 for women's equality could mean the loss of 25 years' worth of progress. Scottish Women's Aid have this year been expanding on their work on the cost of leaving an abusive relationship, focusing on the cost of leaving during the cost of living crisis. The coronavirus pandemic highlighted what has been deemed a shadow pandemic of violence against women. The UN has reported that since the outbreak of COVID-19, emerging data and reports have shown that all types of violence against women and girls, particularly domestic violence, has intensified. and the cost of living crisis has created new barriers and exacerbated existing issues that women face when leaving a relationship with an abusive partner. 73% of survivors of domestic abuse surveyed by Women's Aid England and Wales reported that the cost of living crisis had either prevented them from leaving or made it harder for them to leave. There are women and their children in this local authority area, in your ward and mine, who remain in violent situations because they simply cannot afford to leave. This is unacceptable. Looking across the world, we see the legal status of the rights of women and girls, their human rights, imperilled, rolled back or not advanced. The right to education ignored, keeping women in poverty and unable to escape violent situations. The basic right to choose her own clothing or have her level of autonomy curtailed leaves the girls without the confidence to say no when they find themselves assaulted by men. Removing or restricting reproductive health care is violence. These are all forms of gender-based violence. In Iran, Mahsa Amini, a 22-year-old woman with her life ahead of her, was arrested by authorities for incorrectly wearing the hijab. She died in the custody of the authorities, who she should have been able to trust to protect her. And the women of Iran said, enough. Enough being forced to conform to standards of morality set by men. Enough being met with violence when these men deem them to have fallen short. These women have protested in the streets. They have publicly removed their hijabs if they wish to do so and waved them in the air. They have cut their hair in public. They have spoken and howled in the streets at the injustices they have faced and continue to face. They have risked their lives and freedom to say enough. Male allies have risen up to stand shoulder to shoulder with them and say enough. We see them, we commend them, we are inspired by their call to action, and we resolve to do more to make meaningful, lasting change. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I invite Councillor Loudon to second the motion?
Points in Councillor Killickis's very powerful speech. One of my other party colleagues is going to speak to the motion in support. Thank you.
Okay, can I invite Councillor Lindsay Hamilton?
Thanks, Chair. Speaking on behalf of the Labour Group, I'd like to lend our support to this motion that has been brought forward for us today on the 16 days of action against gender-based violence, and more specifically the current situation in Iran. It's disappointing that we're still needing to discuss such things in the chambers across the world and in this country when women are being killed and sentenced to death in protest for their rights. This is including minors who have had to fight for their rights in something that we take for granted. May all of the 443 people who have lost their lives and the many more who have been affected by this in Iran be in our minds today and in the coming months. Throughout the world, more than five women are killed every hour by someone in their own family. More than 1 in 3 women experience gender-based violence during their lifetime, and less than 40% of women who experience violence seek any help at all. This has been exacerbated by COVID, where women's problems have become even more hidden behind closed doors. Anti-feminist movements are on the rise, and the legal status of women's rights have been attacked left, right and centre. Nonetheless, in America, where abortion rights are being removed for women, in Afghanistan, where there's reports of surgeries and child marriage, the torture and detention of people fleeing abuse and the arrest of protesters, and this is just the tip of the iceberg in terms of our international community, and I think we should recognise these countries as well. It would be obviously amiss of me not to mention the work that has been done locally in terms of work against gender-based violence. On Friday, councillors joined me at Hamilton Townhouse to mark the 16 days of action by having the building lit up orange. This is an important mark locally to show the women who live in our authority that we stand with them. However, it was not lost to me that not that far away from the townhouse last year, Amanda Gibson's body was found in the park. A 16-year-old who was murdered and sexually assaulted, allegedly by her brother, showing that this is a local issue and it's just not just in other countries in the world. May we continue to remember Amanda and her family today. We've still got lots of work to do, colleagues in this chamber, and this is a really important motion being brought forward. I'm proud South Lanarkshire are doing their small part to raise issues such as Iran and gender-based violence. But this is a small part in a bigger picture, and we cannot rest until our women and girls feel safe in this world. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Moore-Razak.
Thank you. First, I need to apologise. I'm at my daughter's graduation and there's a bit noisy in here. I'm outside in the hallway. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Firstly, I'd like to echo everything that's been said by the previous speakers, and I wholeheartedly agree with everything that's been said. I would also like to mention the fact that in countries around the world, such as Afghanistan, where the women have no right to education and also to employment, and the genital mutilation in Asia and Africa just need to be highlighted as well. And I would also raise concerns about France and Belgium. The fact is that in Iran, the hijabs be forced upon the woman, but in France and Belgium, they don't have the right to wear a hijab. And I think that's wrong, because I think it should be down to the choice, should be down to the woman, and it shouldn't be down to any authority. Because the woman has right to her own body, and nobody else has that right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm going to invite Councillor Mary Donnelly to speak in a moment or two. And Councillor Donnelly has requested that she be allowed to light a candle and that we have a minute's reflection on the violence that is taking place across the world. And I've agreed to that after we've taken the vote on the motion. So in lieu of Councillor Loudon, you will be seconding the motion today, Councillor. So if you wish to contribute, thank you.
Thank you, Provost. The theme of this year's campaign is Unite Against Violence Against Women and Girls. So we are asking men to step up to the plate and call it out wherever they witness it. And when they witness violence against women and girls, whether it be in the workplace, the office, the pub, the social club, the football, or in the home, call it out for what it is. No man has the right. Women were disproportionately affected during the pandemic. Gender mainstreaming and intersection budgets analyses must be at the heart of all this Council's response to mitigate its effects. Violence against women and girls is a cause and consequence of gender inequality. Unequal power relations and societal norms sustain violence against women and girls and are pervasive in Scotland. Despite primary prevention being a core objective of our Equally Safe strategy, it is still not being operationalised consistently in with Scottish policymakers. For example, 2018, the Scottish Government paper Ending Homelessness did not include a gendered analysis of housing and homelessness, despite the fact that domestic abuse is the most common reason given by women for a homeless application. A primary prevention approach would have ensured that these issues were embedded within the action plan from the outset, rather than needing to add a gendered analysis retrospectively, and that's what the Scottish Government did do. We also need to continue to support the rollout of our Equally Safe policy in our schools, and I've consistently called for this, but it's not happening, Tony, and I need it to start happening. It's not rolling out to all the schools. And if I'm wrong in that, please update me. Provost, I'll conclude by saying I light this candle in memory of not only the Iranian woman who lost her life in custody, but to all women who have lost their lives at the hands of an abuser. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments or questions? Councillor Horsham. having its...
Yeah, just
Oh, so do. Sorry, Matt.
Hold on a second.
No, do it again. Sorry.
Thanks, Provost. I was just to sort of correct, we've got powerful speeches there, but the Councillor Loudon is still seconding the motion. I think she just got cut off at the start of that, so she is still seconding the motion, just for the record.
Okay, we'll adjust the minutes to reflect
Thank you,
that.
Provost.
Thank you. Colleagues, can we agree the motion? Can we allow Councillor Donnelly, and I think Councillor Hamilton may have a candle as well, and we'll have a minute's silence just to reflect on the casualties and the people that have been subjected to violence, both in the UK and across the world. So if we can just have a minute's reflection, please. Thank you. Thank you. If we move on now to item 13 on the agenda, pages 65 and 66, and that's to adopt the all-party parliamentary group definition of Islamophobia. And the motion has been put forward by Councillor Salamati, and I invite him to speak.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Provost. I'm delighted to be moving the SNP motion on the adoption of all-party parliamentary group's definition of Islamophobia. South Lanarkshire Council covers a vast geographical area consisting of a number of towns and villages, and is proud of its growing diversity and has a strong history of welcoming people from across the world. Scotland's Muslim population has significantly increased in recent decades, and Muslims contribute to all aspects of life and are essential parts of Scottish society. We have Muslim teachers, doctors, lawyers, business owners, police officers, nurses, carers, council officers, and in so many more fields, which all contribute to our thriving economy. Islamophobia has been on the rise in recent years, especially due to false narrative created by far right. A recent study by Muslim Engagement and Development Group found out that in the last 3 years, almost half of mosques across the UK experienced religiously motivated attacks, from vandalism to theft. A report by the Parliamentary Cross-Party Group on Tackling Islamophobia found out that 75% of Scottish Muslims said that Islamophobia is an everyday issue in society. Based on the responses, these incidents are happening at work, at schools, at colleges and universities, and so on. One of the most concerning things from the report was that only 22% of respondents reported Islamophobia. Many respondents lacked confidence in the justice system and felt that their reports would not get taken seriously. Islamophobia abuse is clearly on the rise across Scotland. As councillors, we represent communities across South Lanarkshire and have a duty to call out Islamophobic abuse and to support those who are subject to horrific abuse from bigots. Many Muslim citizens will be able to give their own awful experience of Islamophobia. It is important that we listen to their experiences so that we can learn from them, because being subject to Islamophobic discrimination can be one of the most horrendous things a person can experience in their lives. My family and I have experienced Islamophobia on a number of occasions. My wife, who wears hijab, was spat on. My children suffered racist abuse within their schools and on football pitches, and I have been attacked and chased many times. And examples go on and on. On one occasion, when I came out of the mosque and was walking towards the local shops, a few local youth who looked intoxicated and were carrying glass bottles shouted racist abuse at me. Since they did not get any response from me, one of them has thrown a glass bottle at me, which was smashed into the wall beside my face. And if I have not had moved quickly enough, it would have definitely hit me in the head. I ended up running to a local shop for safety. The color of my skin and the clothes that I wear should never define who I am. Another recent example in the incident of St. Albert's Primary School in Glasgow, in which vile, racist and Islamophobic abuse targeted pupils. By adopting this definition, we will be able to more effectively tackle and root out racist and Islamophobic abuse in South Lanarkshire. The APPG definition is capable of capturing all the different forms of Islamophobia that may otherwise go unnoticed. Since over a decade ago, the month of November has been established as Islamophobia Awareness Month in UK. It is important that, that we all in this chamber raise awareness of the growing levels of Islamophobia. No one should ever be discriminated against because of their religious belief. I would like to finish with a poem from Sadi, a prominent Persian poet who lived about 8 centuries ago. This famous poem has been inscribed within the United Nations headquarters entrance area. It translates as, human beings are members of a whole, in creation of one essence and the soul. If one member is afflicted with pain, other members uneasy will remain. If you have not sympathy for human pain, the name of human you cannot retain. I'm aware that many political parties, including Labour Party, Liberal Democrats, Scottish National Party, Scottish Conservatives and Unions parties, as well as numerous local authorities across the UK have already adopted the APPG definition of Islamophobia. It is time we all unite together and pass this motion so we can show that we recognize the hardship being faced by Muslim communities and that tackling Islamophobia is priority for the Council. Please support the motion. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you. Could I confirm that Councillor Kalikis has seconded the motion? The IT gremlins are hard at work.
Take a 5-minute recess.
Okay, we'll take a 5-minute recess to allow the IT to get the system up and running again. the system again. You take your seats again, please. I invite Councillor Kalikis to second the motion.
Hi, yeah, I'd like to formally second the motion and leave space for us all to reflect on Councillor Salamati's impactful words. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Razak.
Thank you. As I wholeheartedly support Councillor Salamati's motion, I think the work that's been started by the cross-party group in the Scottish Parliament has been outstanding, and I welcome that. I myself have taken part in that, and I went to meetings. I think the issue, there is a big issue with Islamophobia. I myself was born in Edinburgh, and when I moved to Lanarkshire, when I was young, when I was in primary school, the level of abuse, even from adults we took, was absolutely ridiculous, and I think even from a very young age, we had abused, even in Holytown Main Street. I remember being when I was 80 years old and going down Holytown Main Street. I was called over to a van and spat at because of the fact that I was Asian, and I think I'm so glad that this has been brought forward and the Scottish Parliament have done something about this. I think this is an ongoing thing, just as anti-Semitism is, that we need to address any sort of hate head on and not hide from it. And I do welcome this, and I think that the other work we're doing in the Equalities Committee as well will echo this as well and work hand in hand with this. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? Can we agree the motion? Agree. Thank you. We're moving on now to item 14 on the agenda. Notice of motion on 75 years of East Kilbride New Town, page 67. And can I invite Councillor Fagan to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Provost. The motion is set out, and I have indicated to Councillor Robb that I'm also minded to accept some small amendments to it. This year marked 75 years since East Kilbride was designated a new town, but as this anniversary year comes to a close, thoughts inevitably turn to the future. Even if the post-war notions of town planning have faded into history, the vision of what East Kilbride can be as a livable, enterprising, democratic town endures. And rediscovering that vision can no longer be some nostalgic aspiration, it is now economic necessity. East Kilbride is the largest town in South Lanarkshire, and by some measures it is the largest town in Scotland. And while it's often credited as being Scotland's most successful new town, the harsh reality is that new towns are old. East Kilbride's success depends, as it did in 1947, on its outlook and meeting the challenges of the future. Innovation, sustainability, modern living, and an enterprising local economy backed by democratic access to modern public services. But whereas in years gone by, the economic transformation of the town was driven by strong institutions and government-backed enterprise, today East Kilbride has to reinvent itself after years of austerity, the privatisation of town assets, market failure in much of our property, and the erosion of its local identity. This motion is an attempt to set out a way forward. There must be a master plan for East Kilbride Town Centre, and that must be backed up with bids for external funding. South Lanarkshire Council is awaiting the outcome of levelling up fund bids for Shawfield, Clydesdale, and to drive our EV charging revolution. When the next round of funding is open, I'm asking the Council to consider a levelling up fund bid to help redevelop our crisis-hit town centre. We may need to explore other funding options as the motion sets out, and the administrators or future owners will have to partner with us to make this work. But I consider it the best way to leverage in substantial government investment in placemaking and redevelopment, securing a civic development that will also help us meet the Council's estate challenges. The motion calls for further representations to secure the dualling and electrification of the East Kilbride line, and if that cannot be achieved through conventional means, to engage early on how the Glasgow Metro could benefit the town. The previous administration supported our calls for upgrading the East Kilbride line, and I want to maintain as much as possible a Team East Kilbride approach to investment in our rail infrastructure. The motion asks us to develop a festival of ideas celebrating innovation as part of the town's future, not just the past. It seeks to move the debate about the future of the East Kilbride Task Force on, calling it for it to be replaced with a business-led body, and it seeks the agreement of the Council and partners to kickstart the recovery of smart, sustainable East Kilbride's work through a modest financial contribution to be determined at a later point that can help us deliver projects that will help the town and realise the benefits of the transition to a net zero economy. The issues I'm bringing before the Council are relevant to East Kilbride councillors, but in truth they are relevant to us all. East Kilbride is a sleeping giant in the Scottish economy, and it's time to stir the giant. If the decisions we take today help us unleash even a fraction of the town's great potential, then we will build wealth, not just for East Kilbride, but for South Lanarkshire and the west of Scotland as a whole. And so I ask for the Council's support to make that legacy of this, the legacy of this anniversary year. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I ask Councillor Watson to second the motion?
Thanks, Chair. Happy to second the motion. Not going to say too much on it. In fact, given the scale of the debate today and the number of motions we've got, happy to also acknowledge acceptance of Kirsty's amendment. Basically, this motion's a nod to the past of East Kilbride, but more importantly, an eye to the future. And I think that's where our focus should be now, an eye to the future for East Kilbride. Council Leader touched on it there. A thriving East Kilbride means a thriving South Lanarkshire. So hopefully we can get unanimous support for this motion. Thanks very much.
Thank you. You've just had circulated an amendment to the motion from Councillor Robb, which she sent out to East Kilbride members and to the group leaders. It's now being passed around the chamber. Can I ask if both the proposer and the seconder of the motion agree the amendments that Councillor Robb has put forward? Thank you. So, colleagues, can we agree the report? Agreed. Thank you. Okay, can we move forward now to item 15, notice of motion on the National Care Service, page 69 of your papers. The motion was received on the 22nd of November, and I would invite Councillor Brown to speak to this.
Thank you very much, Provost, and obviously the motion's before the Chamber. Care services have been underfunded for years, and we currently have a crisis in continuing to ensure the safety and well-being of everyone dependent on them. There are delays in getting assessments, there are staff shortages in delivering care, and as we know, a continued under-recognition of our care workers, whom we heard from, or rather saw this morning. I have a constituent suffering from Parkinson's disease who will not be given an assessment for self-directed support until an unspecified date in the new year. I've got another case of another constituent of 94 assessed as needing home care, which has been with the Council's sourcing team for 11 weeks with no sign of when provision will be available. Adult social care requires more funding, higher standards and a national aspiration to improve provision across the country. It does not require the bureaucracy and inflexibility of a national care service. Adult care is local in nature. It links with housing services, community support, community groups, local health and indeed mental health services, and it doesn't fit naturally with secondary or tertiary care, not easily organised across the country and not helped by the dead hand of St Andrew's House. This Council has repeatedly said to the Scottish Government that the issue is primarily funding, not structure. And the purpose of today's motion is to ratchet the opposition to the National Care Service Bill up to a new level. Quite simply, it's time that the bill in its present form was scrapped. Since the Feely report, the extent of the financial pressure on public services has become overwhelming. And a bill, certainly in excess of £1 billion, not £1 million, £1 billion, to set up a new bureaucracy is not just ill-advised, it's obscene and a gross waste of public resources that should be going to the front line. We've got a cost of living crisis, an energy crisis, rampant inflation, falling family incomes, decimated public finances. The idea of spending £1 billion on bureaucrats is no longer tenable. Some of the challenges in the care system will be helped by injection of money. Some will be helped by recruitment of staff. Some by a favourable conclusion to the job evaluation process. Absolutely none will be sorted by structural upheaval. The costs of the bill do not include improved pay and conditions for staff, removal of charging, increased investment in social work and so forth. Except for a small sum for carer respite, the costs are bureaucratic costs for setting up and running the system. Over the 5-year period 2022-23 to 26-27, these are estimated at the enormous figure of between 644 million and 1,261 million, an astonishingly vague and slipshod figure. Unspecified but extremely large amount is also ongoing, a cost every year in the future. The Scottish Government also expect to use consultants to identify the cost of things like VAT, assets and pension, and they anticipate that 75,000 staff will transfer to care boards. Just imagine that, the admin and the hassle cost of TUPE for 75,000 staff. The Scottish Government's plans got a real roasting from the Parliamentary Committee looking at the financial memorandum. SNP MSP Michelle Thompson, herself with a business background, said, "How do we end up in the position where a financial memorandum does not even begin to cover the fundamentals? I can have no confidence whatever that it represents any level of accuracy and therefore value for money whatsoever." It was, she said, the Scottish Government signing a blank cheque for the public purse. And she said, if it was your money, you wouldn't be risking it. Now, we're all signed up, and all the parties in Edinburgh signed up to the European Charter for Local Self-Government. I won't go on about that because it's the thing that lies behind this, but that is all about local self-government and local support for these things. The Accounts Commission, they said, reform in other areas of the public sector has shown that expected benefits are not always clearly defined, and even where they are, they're not always delivered. It risks a diversion, speaking about the bill, from tackling the immediate challenges within the social care sector. The focus should be on driving up pay and conditions for staff to make it an appealing career, to make sure that people can get care at home or close to home. There is a role for national government as to develop and enable high care standards and entitlements across Scotland, and to do the workforce planning that seems to have been lacking in the past, to support the recruitment of more high-quality staff to meet the growing demand for care services, and indeed is to fund councils fairly and equitably to enable the provision of a care service with local delivery, local accountability and care users and care staff at its heart. But the bureaucracy, the centralising agenda, the cost burden of the current bill, these are highly damaging and totally unaffordable in the current or likely financial climate. This council will, I hope, pass this motion unanimously and tell Scottish ministers right across the parties to refocus funding on the frontline services, not the bureaucracy, on the vulnerable population like my constituent who requires carers, respite for his wife and family, access to activities and support to enhance his well-being. I move the motion in my name.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Could I invite Councillor Norman Ray to second the motion? Councillor Ray, you'll have to. Thank you. Okay, Councillor Ray, you can go ahead.
Hello. Thank you, Provost. I'm happy to second the motion. Local decision-making and accountability are not just abstract concepts. They are of vital importance to ensure good decision-making and responsiveness to the needs of our communities. The proposed National Care Service would remove local control from this council and centralise decision-making power. This will not result in better decisions and better provision for those who rely on care services. Rather, it will mean a remote and expensive bureaucracy that is ill-equipped to respond to the needs of our communities in South Lanarkshire. This is not only bad for care services, carers and service users, it is a threat to local democracy itself. These reforms These proposals conform to a pattern of centralisation of power by the Scottish Government and risk leaving this council as a hollowed-out shell, increasingly irrelevant and powerless, while all important decisions affecting our communities are made by remote ministers and anonymous boards who lack an appreciation of the particular needs of those communities. This motion allows us to express our opposition to this centralisation of power and presents an alternative that would deliver real improvement of social care services, and I urge members to support it.
Thank you. Questions or comments? And I'll start with Councillor Margaret Walker. Oh, I think you're okay now, Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Provost. Just like to support this motion. I'm not going to repeat what Robert has said. The issues were very well covered, but also just to acknowledge that the response that South Lanarkshire had submitted also covered those issues really well, and I'd like to acknowledge that, the quality of the response that outlined those issues and highlighted those issues. And also I'd like to acknowledge when Paul was the witness at the Finance Committee, I think he did a marvellous job there in actually putting the case forward in terms of the problems with the National Care Service. And also acknowledge the measures that have already been carried forward in terms of service development to tackle things like the delays in assessment, which is inextricably tied to the problems in the NHS and delayed discharge. And also the additional staff that hopefully is going to have an impact in that. But we're doing that, with under, a limited funding and funding tranches that are coming from the Scottish Government. And I agree completely that to spend a total of 1.5 billion in structural change is just an intolerable situation. And we have to continue to highlight, which I think we will do through this motion. So I would wholeheartedly support this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Richard Nelson.
Thank you, Provost, and I echo Robert Brown's comments already, but I just think to see the recent headlines that have uncovered the mess the SNP has made of our NHS services in Scotland, the introduction of a National Care Service will in effect take powers away from local government by handing it over to SNP, Scottish Government ministers. I cannot see how any councillor could possibly support any legislation that takes powers away from local communities and elected members. Unfortunately, there has been a pattern emerging from Holyrood as SNP try to centralise services. We have seen it with our planning departments, with the Scottish Government reporters, which strips local communities of their ability to campaign and outright reject planning applications that are not suitable for their area. It also overturns the decisions made by elected members. It should come as no surprise that as a Conservative, I believe decision-making should be made as close to the heart of the communities as possible, and that applies to care services, which we are debating here today. As it stands, the SNP has not been forthcoming with information how a national care service would be governed or who would be represented on local care boards. Councillors are being left in the dark on these important matters, and what annoys me most is that once again the SNP are creating legislation with little to no consideration of how this impact will impact local government and its ability to roll out this successfully. We have seen the mess with the 1140 hours early learning and child programme, and my fear is that this same could be repeated with the National Care Service. Fundamentally, the National Care Service Bill would fail to tackle the issue of underfunding. COSLA estimates that the total cost of implementing these recommendations we've already heard at over £1.5 billion, although this figure, I believe, does not take into account children's services, just in social or mental health services. The SNP government has estimated, though, that this could cost somewhere between £664 million and £1.2 billion to set up over 5 years, with running costs of over £500 million. This being said, a recent report outlined, and I quote, "It does not provide an overall estimate of the cost of creating a national care service and has suggested that the final bill could be significantly higher." Also, that report said it was unclear whether inflation has been considered in initial costings, and given the current ferry fiasco, I dread to think what this will cost South Lanarkshire Council overall. What I find staggering is the widespread criticism that this bill has already received. The First Minister's own SNP Scottish Government ministers have also criticised these plans, and it is now time for Nicola Sturgeon to listen for once and drop this disastrous bill. Before I finish, Provost, I'd like to mention our hard-working, dedicated staff, and some of them are here today, and the severe impact this will have on them. After a pandemic and now the cost of living crisis, we should be refocusing our efforts on our current system and making it as effective as possible to ensure that those who need it get the support that they need. It is clear that now is not the time, and I could think of other priorities taxpayers' cash that could be used for, tackling the mental health crisis being one of them. But that's not to say that we shouldn't continuously look to improve the care services that each and every local authority provides. The motion today, presented by Councillor Brown, has the full support of the Conservative group. We sympathise and echo the salient points of the motion, which is clear, and a message to the First Minister and the SNP Scottish Government that they should fund local authorities fairly and equitably in such a way as enabled them to deliver key council and specifically care services effectively. And we support this motion. Provost, thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments? Councillor Gavin Keat.
Thanks, Chair. Given this ill-thought-out bill has been pushed by the SNP government and their Green enablers, quite interesting that we've not had any comments from them.
The opportunity is there for anyone in the chamber to comment, and there are no further comments or questions. Can I ask if we have a unanimous agreement, colleagues? Thank you. Now, we're moving on to item 16 on the agenda, but we're also nearing the point of a lunch break. So it's 5 to 12, and I'd like to stop now for the lunch break and return to the chamber at 12:25, and that will allow you to get some lunch, and we shouldn't be, hopefully, too long in winding up the remaining items on the agenda. Thank you. Sorry?
Why are we having a lunch?
It's quite all right. We had a slight hiccup with the food delivery. It was supposed to be there at 12 and it came at past, so there was quite a lot of quick eating went on down there in the tea room, but it was welcomed, and the people that were there said it was good to get a resumption of service. Now, one or two people, I think, have departed, so Susan's going to have to take an updated sediment, not after the food, but they've had to rush off somewhere else. So we'll take another sediment. Okay, Susan.
Thank you, Provost. Again, I've tried to know where possible, but I know one or two people aren't here. I'm just going to check if Councillor Buchanan, Archie Buchanan, has returned. So I'm just going to check my list. The machine has stuck.
I just need to shout it out.
I know. Don't believe Councillor Buchanan Archie Buchanan has rejoined. All right. Okay. Thank you, Councillor Horsham. I'll just check whether we have Councillor Donnelly has now returned. Councillor Kerr, I can see, is back. Councillor Lambie. Okay. Councillor Nelson. Councillor Razak. I'll just check the list. We don't seem to have Councillor Razak back. And that's us. Thank you, Provost. Hand back.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to item 16 in the agenda now. The notice of motion, cut fuel bills, cut carbon emissions, kickstart the green economy. That's pages 71 to 73 in your paper, and I'm going to invite Councillor Kirsten Robb to speak to the motion.
Thank you, Provost, and thank you to Councillor Clark for seconding the motion, and thank you for other councillors' engagement on it, including amendments from Councillor Fagan that I'm minded to accept. I want to make crystal clear what I'm asking for your support on today. The cheapest form of energy is that which you don't use. So this motion is all about minimising energy consumption through behaviour, campaigns, simple changes and high standards of insulation. Voting for this motion will ensure energy is saved immediately and into the future. As councillors and staff, we've all experienced buildings that are too warm or lights left on unnecessarily. For example, it's 22 degrees here in here today, which is why I'm down. I've checked. And we've all heard about the immense pressure on council budgets from over £7 million increase in energy costs. This needs an immediate strategic reaction. Across the world, people are ratcheting up action on energy reduction. South Lanarkshire can too. So the first part of the motion calls for an energy reduction plan prepared in consultation with unions and building users. And it calls for simple, immediate campaigns this winter so we can save more energy and money for our vital frontline services. The second part of the motion is primarily about raising standards in council-funded new builds, as some other councils are doing. It's also about ensuring current standards are met too. I have researched it, consulted council officers, unions, other building professionals and taken on board comments from other political parties. The construction industry has found nationally that when tested, many buildings do not meet the current energy standards that are set out to be achieved, resulting in energy and money being wasted. This needs to change, and it's changing nationally through building regulations and National Planning Framework 4. But we can also do our bit in South Lanarkshire to help and prepare for the changes, so avoiding the costs of retrofitting in just a few years' time. Therefore, this part of the motion focuses on council buildings designed from 2023 onwards. Today, councillors can set the aspiration for the highest standards of energy efficiency, but give officers the time to work out the best approach and bring that to the Climate Committee. And finally, with the third part of the motion, South Lanarkshire Council can be a leader in this field, using our spending power and our build programmes to kickstart the green economy, creating stable, long-term, decent jobs long into the future. A note to end on. For me and many others, this motion is about common sense. It's about using our precious energy resources carefully. It's about taking further steps to insulate the council and residents in new builds against future energy price shocks. And yes, it's about action on climate change too. Young people came to the Climate Committee last month and told us what they were doing in their schools and in their lives to act. There's no bones about it. Acting on climate change now will be far cheaper than paying the price later of inaction or unambitious action. We councillors are the decision makers right now, and we have a narrow window of opportunity to act for every generation to come, and we can't kick the can down the road. Our citizens are looking to us for leadership on fuel bills and climate change now. Thank you, and I ask you to support this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Robb. I understand Councillor Clark is seconding that, so I invite you to speak.
Yes, thank you, Provost. I'm delighted to be able to second this motion from Councillor Robb on behalf of the SNP group. I'd like to thank members of other parties, including the Leader of the Council, for their cross-party engagement on this, and I'm also happy to accept the proposed amendment. We need to be ambitious when it comes to climate change. Similar to what Councillor Robb said, the costs of not acting on climate change far outweigh the costs of acting now. Scotland has ambitious targets of net zero emissions by 2045. South Lanarkshire needs to play a part in this. Rapid decarbonisation is needed to avoid the most catastrophic and irreversible impacts of climate change. It is an issue that will affect all of us and generations to come. Adopting a fabric first or equivalent approach forms part of this journey. The Passive House Trust say an average 68 metres squared new home in the UK would need 28 solar panels to actually achieve net zero operational carbon emissions, which will not even have the roof space available for. On the other hand, an equivalent passive house would only need 14 solar panels to achieve this. This helps to highlight the importance of this sort of approach. It will also ease the pressure on our capacity for renewable energy. This motion seeks a move towards maximum energy efficiency. As said in the motion preamble, heat demand in a passive house non-domestic building is less than a fifth of that in a non-passive house equivalent. This results in massive energy savings, with a £30,000 to £50,000 saving in fuel bills in primary schools and a third of costs in domestic properties. We are in a cost of living crisis with soaring bills, and people will continue to struggle for years to come, which means we need long-term solutions to support our residents, as well as actions we can take now. The costs spent on construction are outweighed by the energy savings that will occur over the lifetime of the building. Costs are also reduced when this is done at scale, so the more we build, the less it will cost. We can look at ways we can reduce our energy demand in current buildings now. I had to turn all the radiators off in our offices because there's not much point in having it roasting all the time when so many of us are working from home, especially. I'm pleased that this motion seeks to work positively and engage with staff and unions on this. The motion gives us flexibility to design the best approach that works for South Lanarkshire, while supporting our local businesses and supply chain to provide green opportunities and skills to workers and help grow our green economy. To conclude, I'd like to ask all councillors to support this motion today to cut fuel bills, cut carbon emissions and kickstart the green economy. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Fagan, I understand you have an amendment. Can I check if Kirsten, Robb and yourself, Ross, have accepted the amendment? Do you wish to cover your amendment, Councillor Fagan?
I had intended to, but I won't, because I have to say I think the approach that both Councillor Robb and Councillor Clark set out was very constructive and I think very helpful at this point, where we try to make our capital programme in particular as ambitious as it can be when it comes to meeting the requirements and the drive towards net zero, but also to make sure that the targets and the standards we set for ourselves and those we work with are achievable and affordable as well. And there is a great deal of comment in the media today about the transition and the pace of transition and how we make sure it is, as I say, is achievable and it's affordable. I think the Climate Change Committee at a national level have released a statement earlier on today that we've got to absorb that. We've got to do, as Kirsten Robb said, give our officials the time to assimilate what is a developing, almost a constantly developing area of policy. And I think that the amendment, that's what the amendment seeks to do. And I just want to put on record my appreciation for the constructive approach that's been taken to this. And if I might say, the other items of business today. Thank you.
Thank you. Can we agree this motion? Okay, thank you. We have one other item which is for noting, and it's the External Auditor's Annual Report. Are there any questions or comments regarding this report? Councillor Susan Kerr.
Thank you, Provost. My question is to the Director of Finance. Could you advise me of the financial impact in cash terms of paragraph 119 of the External Auditor's Annual Report to the Council? For members' information, what this states is that, in effect, there has been a real terms reduction in our funding since 2013-14 of 9.6%. This contrasts with an increase of 4.3% in Scottish Government funding of other areas of the budget over the same period. Thank you.
Paul Manning.
Thanks, Provost. And just for members' information, that this is a question that Councillor Kerr did ask by email to me earlier on this week. And as Councillor Kerr states, this is a reference in the Audit Scotland External Auditor's Report. There's a paragraph which is paragraph 119. And just to recap, it makes the point that the Accounts Commission reports that councils have seen their underlying cumulative funding fall by 4.2% in real terms since 13-14. Other analysis indicates that when funding for Scottish Government priority areas is removed, there has been a real terms reduction of 9.6%. So that would take into account money that's been passed to councils for Scottish Government initiatives across that period. When you take that into account, there is this more significant reduction of 9.6% in council funding. So Councillor Kerr's question, right, is around what would that represent in a cash value to the council. So that's analysis in terms of that 9.6% reduction that's been done by Audit Scotland on a national basis. If, as an approximation of a cash figure, I try and calculate that as it applies to South Lanarkshire Council's budget, if I go back to 2013-14 and look at the council budget, and if I look at the budget net of council tax and net of other non-government revenue income, the council had a budget at that point of £537 million. So if I take that Audit Scotland percentage of 9.6%, that reduction that they refer to, that expressed in pounds would be £51.5 million. So that's the Audit Scotland figure, the Audit Scotland percentage expressed as a cash value when you take that in terms of the council's budget. So hopefully that answers the member's question, Provost. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Alec Allison.
Following on from what you've said then, Paul, Scottish Government, we've been told, underspent by £2 billion in the last year. Should we be writing to them then and asking for a share of that to make up for the money that our budgets have been reduced by over that period of time? Certainly, I think, be a good use of that money supporting constituents rather than sitting in a bank account unused.
Provost, if I could be bold, that's a political question. That's for members to determine.
Thank you. Okay, thanks. Councillor John Anderson.
Thanks, Chair. I think the vast majority of that money was well documented, that a lot of that money that's underspent was money allocated for students, for loans, and also for businesses. So if Alison wants to pick the pocket of businesses and students, then he can feel free to do so.
Councillor Joe Fagan.
I think as this is our last meeting and the last item before we break up for Christmas, I will do my best to maintain a certain spirit of consensus around here, because I think what I would say is the underspend figures around the Scottish Government underspend warrant analysis, and I've seen some early analysis of that, and it is, I think before making sweeping statements about it, it's useful to conduct a more in-depth analysis as to where there is a real underspend and where that underspend is more about accounting. What I would say, however, is that the figure that has been quoted in cash terms is very significant. And members will, across the council, will be aware that this week COSLA launched its budget SOS campaign, where we are asking for the Scottish Government, collectively as local government, to shift £1 billion into the budgets of Scotland's councils. And I think that my advice to all parties, and I've said this at the Executive Committee and I'll repeat it, is to use the avenues that are available to us within our respective political parties and collectively as a council and through organisations such as COSLA to lobby for every penny that we can to come to local government, because throughout today, whether it was the cost of transition or the cost of social care, we see where we need that money, and we need that money locally. And that would be my appeal to everyone today, and certainly to engage with the COSLA campaign that was launched this week.
Colleagues, can we agree to note this paper? Before you depart, I'd like to thank everyone. We've had a very pleasant meeting today. Good questions asked, plenty of good, valuable comments made, and a bit of fun in between where we've enjoyed the chat. So thank you to everyone that's here. I would like to wish everyone a very happy Christmas and a really excellent new year. Again, I would wish that Councillor Hamilton manages to get through the festive period and she enjoys that with her family and friends. I'd like to also wish all of our officers thank you from everyone here for the hard work that you put in. It doesn't go unnoticed, and we really appreciate that in the detail of the reports that you present to us and the diligence of being able to answer the many and sometimes unexpected questions that are asked. So enjoy your festive season, everyone, and take care, and we'll see everyone after the new year. Thank you.